So as far as mortgage deduction, I'm never going to be against the mortgage deduction, okay? Not only do I believe in it, but it would be the kiss of death politically if you said you want to get rid of the mortgage deduction. But there has to be an overall issue, overall solution related to affordable, assisted living for populations that need to live in group homes or live in some sort of assisted living type of thing. So I don't know, have the answer for you. The one positive thing that I can contribute, having thought about this and having held a conference when I was county executive on autism, because there's no department of autism, we see it growing all the time, and there's no like one place that houses the issues related to autism, and this whole idea of aging out. And there's a lot of services for kids for autism that are growing.
And you know, parents who have a medically ill loved one living at home have exactly the same issue.
Right. So, and it's mentally ill, it's autism, it's mental retardation, it's seniors. So that you have all these populations that are living but are in need of special care. That we have to figure out how to put them all together. Not to live all together, but put them together in a housing type solution that we address it. I don't have the answer for you. I think there's some answers that are in the Project Independence thing that John's talked about. I think there's coupling senior services with housing is a part of it, but that's the best I can do for you right now.
You know,
It's not the topic.
yeah, well, this is on financing and taxes, so it segues into this. I worked with an organization called the Disability Opportunity Fund. A friend of mine runs it, and he uses, and I helped him with this, he uses a portion of the Internal Revenue Code and part of the federal budget in terms of community development financing institution. And what they do is, and we conducted a survey, I conducted a survey for him of 35 of the largest agencies that serve Long Islanders with disabilities in the region. And the most important thing that the survey showed us was access to capital. And if we could, through a CDFI, if we could provide what? Oh yeah, it's Community Development Financing Institution is a not-for-profit private bank, which gets donations to it from insurance companies, from wealthy individuals, and they lend that money out at lower than market rate interest. And what that does is it contributes to a lower cost housing. And then that deals with your issues. So we're using the tax code. We need more of that. And what we're doing, and my friend Charlie is a capitalist, and nothing wrong with capitalism. I'm a strong proponent of it. But what it does is it accesses the capital markets. It accesses the private sector. It uses benefits in the Internal Revenue Code to provide low-cost housing to address the housing issue for the very folks you're talking about. And if you do that in any kind of development, Suffolk County has a local development corporation that provides not-for-profit agencies with low-cost loans to build. So there are mechanisms out there to do that. That's in the code. That's what we have to access to make sure folks like you get that.
You know, this is an example of how, think about how specific this topic is of the CDIF. CDFI, these smart people that are working on these type of things and what it takes to solve these type of, there's not some easy, simple answer the way some candidates are presenting these days, that it's all so simple, I'm going to be tough, I'm going to be strong, I'm going to be the best. And it requires detailed policy analysis in all these little small areas. Donald Trump.
You're going to be huge. So I think you just walk right up to the solution in what you said. I think that the problem that something presents is the solution to some other problem. And part of what we're talking about right here in mental health, although this is not a mental health forum, so we won't talk about that. It's very close to my heart because my wife just retired after 30 years as a psychiatric social worker. The problem is if there's not enough housing to house these people, what do you have to do to get housing? Well, one of the things you have to do is build the housing, right? You have to build the housing that provides jobs. That requires financing to build it. You need to encourage and figure out whose responsibility. By the way, the two sides politically, because I like doing these 1,000-foot look downs. It depends on who you are. Is this a government responsibility or a private responsibility? That's the war we're having in the country, and that's the entire thing. Should builders build these things on their own? Should people contribute money and government have nothing to do with it? Or does government have a responsibility? Talk among yourselves. But the problem itself goes to one of infrastructure, creating the jobs to help solve that problem. Now you got to get thinking people together in a room, which is something that Tom is really great at, in order to thrash this out without thrashing each other.
So while we want to address this problem for our local community, this is a real problem in New York with a large population. I bet it's got a larger percentage population than North Carolina or South Carolina, say, for example. And while we're sending all of our money to North Carolina and South Carolina, we can't address that problem as effectively as we would like to in our local community. So who's got another question about another topic? Go ahead. Yes.
You said, what do you think should be done about the sending the excess to
Other states? I think that we have to be very careful. So this is something that I plan on making a big issue about, which is, historically, New York has been looked at by the rest of the country as getting all these great advantages. We're taking care of all your poor people in New York City. And this is what we heard in really the 80s and 90s. It's still happening today. And they think the other states, the Republicans, in the blue state, the red states, think we're getting so much advantage here in New York State from the federal government because all this money's coming back to us, and we're probably one of the largest recipients of transfer payments, welfare payments. But we're contributing so much more to the rest of the country in these other areas. So I would use this as a vehicle by which to argue why we need to have more money given to New York State, to the 3rd Congressional District, for infrastructure. We need the money to come in to improve our LaGuardia Airport. As grants, as part of federal programs. We need to have the money come back to us to improve the sewer systems in Suffolk County and in unsewered parts of Nassau County that are polluting the Long Island Sound and polluting our sole source aquifer. We need to have the federal fund. In Glen Cove, our sewage treatment plant was built in the 1980s or so with 95% federal funding. Now you don't get anything. You get loans from the state, maybe, low-interest loans. So, we, I believe, for mass transit, for example, we should be getting more money from the federal government for mass transit. So we need to try and, if we're going to be donating all this money to the rest of the country, we have a pretty darn good argument that you shouldn't be cutting our 9/11 funding, or our Homeland Security money, or the money for our police to make sure we're protected after there's a bombing in Chelsea. You should be helping to fund us, because you know why? We're paying for everything else in the country. We shouldn't be paying for other places to continue to take people away from us. I'm not saying we're going to go to zero. We're not going to become a net taker, certainly, and we're always going to be a net donor because we have a lot more wealthy people in New York State than they do in other places in the world, and we are doing fine as far as attracting wealthy people. But it's not a binary thing. It's not either taker or donor. It's that we need to bring more money back to this area, because everybody in this room knows people that are struggling under their local tax burden. And this is not something I'm just saying, emotionally. This is based upon studies that show that we're the highest tax people in the country in our local taxes. And because we're paying for it a lot, because all of our money's going to Albany and going to Washington, D.C. So it's not as simple as, all or nothing. But I think that we have to make stronger arguments that we need to bring more of the money. I asked someone to make the copy of the article for me that I read a long time ago. But Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, it's time to get out of the New Deal mode. Moynihan said, this was in 1999. The idea was that you sent your problems to the nice people in Washington who would fix them, not the local Tammany Hall bosses. Well, nobody in Washington today is going to do one damn thing to save Montefiore Hospital. That was like a big issue in those days. So, nobody in Washington is helping us fix the real problems that we face here that have to be addressed. So, but this will be with, things that are clearly federal responsibility, like, Kings Point is such a huge issue that Gary worked on for so many years, that is facing a struggle once again. It'll be the Northport Hospital. It'll be the federal Superfund site at Bethpage. It'll be the airport problems, the airport noise problems coming out of LaGuardia. These are all related to federal issues, but it'll also be local and state issues that we're dealing with here that we need help from the federal government to help fund. Mainly, it's something that everybody seems to be building consensus on, which is infrastructure. We need to increase the investment from the federal level in infrastructure. Okay. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I look at, it is, to your question here as well, there are two things, when I prepare tax returns for clients, there's two things that really, stick in my craw. The first is the low threshold for taxing Social Security benefits to the seniors. Almost everybody in Long Island pays income tax on the Social Security they receive. The second is the alternative minimum tax, which is the bane of the middle class. And those are two simple things that, just think for a second, how many states have senior citizens paying tax on their Social Security? That seems to me that there shouldn't be any opposition to index the amount of Social Security that's taxable based upon your overall gross income. It hasn't changed in years. And I think that's something that can do. And what that does is it puts money back in seniors' pockets to spend in the local economy, which, as we all know, we're not spending. And there's a real reason why people run to the internet to do their shopping. It's cheaper. They go into the store to look at the goods, and they go home and they go on the internet and they buy the goods they saw in the store. That's why the bricks and mortar retail stores are vacant for so long, because there's no demand for the products.
It has a big impact on our sales tax revenues.
Absolutely.
Huge impact on sales tax revenues.
Absolutely. In fact, I was retained by an estate attorney to show that the future commissions of a dead agent would not be received because the bricks and mortar wouldn't be rented for retail. And so that's those kind of things. The reason why the internet is a success is because people don't have the money to spend in the local economy. So these are two things that I would look at. I know that Senator Schumer was for it. I know that Congressman Israel was for it. I know that you worked on the alternative minimum tax. Those are two things that could make it easier for us to donate more money to the states that need it, because we get to keep more of our money here, and that would certainly sustain the middle class and the seniors, which are really the two groups that are getting hurt.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Gary.
Couple of quick points. I flew in on Marine One with President George W. Bush. He had gotten off at Kennedy Airport from Air Force One for him to speak at the graduation here at the Merchant Marine Academy. And he looked out the window when we were leaving, flying over all these beautiful homes. And he looked at me and he looked down again and he said, "Ackerman, those people vote for you?" I said, "My constituents in Great Neck live right, but think left." That's shifted a little too over the years. I was going to talk about the alternative minimum tax because I think it's a huge problem that you're going to have to solve. It's not indexed on the middle class, more and more of the middle class. And when we say middle class, it's not middle class. We don't have classes. It's middle income. But that translates into high guys and high everybody. One of the things that we should start thinking of could be built off of a platform, I'll suggest this to you, that I came up with about midway through my career, so that's about 15 or 18 years ago in Congress. I chaired a committee in the Post Office Committee. And what we did is we had an experiment that's now part of the law that takes the cost of living in an area based on the Board of Labor Statistics, which you're very familiar with, and says which are the high-cost areas, because we are still today, even though we adjusted, having a problem getting air traffic controllers. They're federal people. My mailman, my letter carrier cannot afford to live in 95% of the neighborhoods that he delivers to. And in West Podunk, the letter carrier is the wealthiest guy in town. The number 2 guy of the FBI, the head of the New York region, came once from wherever he came, had to rent a house, a place in New Jersey because he has 5 kids. He lasted 1 year. You know, that's if you can't be Herbert Hoover, you want to do New York. Because you got the spies, you got the UN, you got Wall Street, you got everything. That's where the meat is in that industry. He left after a year. He couldn't afford to live in the region. So what we did, Tom, was we came up with a study and took the 5 largest high cost of living areas. I made sure we did 5 because I wanted to get Boston in there because the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee was from Boston. So we wanted to make sure he had a stake in the legislation. And we said there would be a pay differential for federal employees who work in high cost of living areas, you know, whether it's in California or New York or wherever they might happen to be. They get that now. There's a small differential, doesn't quite make up for the cost of living. And that's a way to equalize things without disadvantaging anybody. Because in effect, we're paying the male person over there a heck of a lot more than over here because his mansion costs $200,000 and yours costs $1.4 million. That should be spread out and look to apply that somehow to the entire taxation base, where you have a federal tax based on the cost of living.
So does everyone understand what he's saying? Saying, you know, in Podunk, if you're making $150,000 a year, you're a wealthy man. If you're making $150,000 in Nassau County,
You're struggling.
so,
You're really struggling. I mean, think about that. When it costs you to buy groceries and pay off a house and send your kids to school, and someone's going to have to raise their hand and ask about college debt.
okay, that's, college debt is not tonight, but we'll, if you want to ask, we can do it.
Okay,
This is not working anymore, I don't think, is it?
okay, who has it, anybody else have a comment or a question that they want to bring up? Yes,
My question is concerned with multinational conglomerates. You talked about the global economy, you talked about caretakers, net donors, and what I'm concerned, and I think many of us are concerned, is companies, you know, they make billions from America, and then they stash their profits overseas, in either Cayman Islands or, you know, Swiss bank accounts. My question to you is, how will you enforce, make sure that multinational conglomerates enforce American laws, and how will you punish the companies that don't?
okay, as far as enforcing laws, that's usually not the Congress people that enforce the laws. The enforcement is done by the executive branch. So it's their job to make sure that they follow the rules that exist on the books. It's the job for the Congress to determine whether there should be new rules put in place. The question is why is this happening? Why is this money being stashed in all these different places? As a matter of fact, there was a thing on 60 Minutes 6 months ago that people are stashing their money in America now. People in other countries are stashing their money in America. Did you see that, Joe? Some places that they're hiding the money here in America from other parts of the world. But there is right now, I think the number is $2 trillion, I think is the number, $2 trillion of American corporate profits that are being kept overseas because they don't want to bring it back to America because of the tax rate here in this country. And one of the things that the Democrats need to be thinking about, and the president is talking about this, and the Congress, Democrats and Republicans are talking about this as well, is what can we do to bring these funds back into America, which would generate a huge windfall for the country, and then put those funds right into infrastructure improvements in the country. So I'm just reading something now. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but it's a study that was recently done in Harvard, and it was talking about how, you know, all the economic indicators that we see started really in the decline in economic indicators in America, as far as small businesses not being created, as far as the disparity of wealth, as far as weight. Started in the 90s. They started going down. But what happened under Bill Clinton is that we had this
revolution that took place with technology that really got us through the 1990s, and we saw this tremendous growth in the 1990s, just because we had this boom related to the internet and related to technology. And then we saw a housing boom in the 2000s, and then, we got out of control with the housing, suburban building, quite frankly, in Las Vegas, in Phoenix, and other places that doesn't make any sense. But once those booms, when we lost those booms, those temporary, short-term booms, we got back to the bad things that were happening as far as us not being competitive in the global economy. So we have to think of bigger structural changes, of which one of the things we need to look at is related to corporate tax policy. So I don't know if I was very clear about that, though.
Excuse me, something to think about in the answer to your question. Part of the money that has been offshore was a result of three parts of the Internal Revenue Code. The international trade companies, the domestic international trade companies, which allow domestic companies, if they had a foreign subsidiary, and they sold it offshore, they could keep their money offshore, and they didn't have to repatriate it, and it saved them money. So this started, and you're right when you say the 1990s. Years ago, I worked for Sucrest Sugar Company. We made the sugar, and we had a domestic international sales corporation, and we had an international trade corporation, and this was all allowed and available in the Internal Revenue Code, which was passed by the Congress, I'm guessing, in the 70s. And all accountants in these companies took these seminars on how to use it and how to avoid taxes. And so the answer to your question is the Congress has to stop that benefit. How we repatriate those dollars. I know that Congressman Israel